Cuisinart presents Patently Easy Food Processor Cooking with your host, Greg Patton.
Hi, I'm Greg Patton, and welcome to my kitchen. On today's show, I'll be using the food processor to make an easy and informal meal, including this hearty but low-calorie chicken minestrone soup, a marvelous loaf of cracked wheat bread, and a terrific apple pie that's sweetened with apple juice instead of sugar. One of the best things you can make with your food processor is homemade bread, and the bread I'm going to make now is a marvelous loaf of cracked wheat bread. Cracked wheat is the whole wheat kernel that has been partially cooked, dried, and then cracked open. You can buy it in supermarkets or in health food stores, and it looks like this. Cracked wheat comes in two forms, coarse or fine. And this is the coarse form, and this is the kind that you should buy for this recipe. Use 1/3 of a cup of the coarse cracked wheat, which is also known as bulgur, incidentally, and 2/3 of a cup of unsweetened apple juice. And you want to cook both of these together very slowly over low heat for about 10 minutes until the juice is absorbed. And what the apple juice does is give the bread just a very nice, light background hint of sweetness. This is what the cracked wheat looks like after it's cooked with the apple juice. It sort of looks like cooked brown rice. Let it cool, and it's ready to use. Sprinkle 1 package of active dry yeast over a 1/4 cup of warm water, not over 115 degrees Fahrenheit, and add a 1/2 teaspoon of sugar, and stir them together and let them sit until the yeast is bubbly and foamy, which then tells you that you have a healthy, active, alive population of yeast cells. When the yeast is bubbly and foamy like this, add a 1/2 cup of ice water to it. You're probably wondering why I've added ice water to some warm yeast mixture, and I'll explain a bit later as the processor needs the dough. In the meantime, put the dough blade in place in the work bowl and add 2 cups of bread flour, which is something that you can buy in your supermarkets, and it is called bread flour, 1/2 cup of whole wheat flour, a teaspoon of salt, and 2 tablespoons of butter that you've cut in 2 pieces. And then you want to process this for just about 15 seconds. Then add the cold cooked bulgur, or cracked wheat, to the work bowl and process for 5 seconds. With the motor on, add the ice water yeast mixture slowly through the feed tube, only in a stream as fast as the flour will absorb it. And the reason for that is so that the water doesn't just fall right to the bottom of the work bowl and go sloshing along. And also the reason for the ice water is to prevent the dough from overheating in the work bowl, because it is being moved around the work bowl rather rapidly. There, that's all the water. Now, as soon as the dough gathers into a ball, process for 90 seconds. And if the dough is too dry and balls up in the middle of the work ball like it is doing here, then add a little bit of water through the feed tube. And if it's too wet, then you add a little bit of flour through the feed tube. And you want to process the dough for about 1.5 minutes, and it should clean the bottom and side of the work bowl, just as it's doing now. Making bread with the food processor is really making bread with the touch of a finger. And you see, when the dough is done, it should be very slightly sticky and also very smooth and elastic. And I'm just going to work it briefly between my hands to show you what it looks like. You see, very stretchy, just like that, to show you that the gluten has been activated. And then to let the dough rise, the easiest thing is to put it into a lightly floured 1-gallon plastic bag, and then you squeeze all of the air out, as I'm doing here, and you secure the top with a twist tie, and then that way, when you set the dough to rise, there's this space for the dough to fill up the space that you have squeezed out. And then when the dough is risen, in about an hour or so, it'll look like this. It'll be nice and puffy, and fill the plastic bag. This way you don't have any bowls to wash, and it is very convenient. So let me move the just made dough out of the way. This is the risen dough, and you see it is nice and smooth and stretchy and elastic and only very slightly sticky. And then what you want to do now is just to shape it into a loaf. And so you pat the dough out into a rough rectangle, and you shape this into a tapered loaf about 12 to 14 inches long. Roll the dough up jelly roll fashion, as I'm doing here, and then you just pinch the edges to seal. And I think in this close-up shot you can see how nice and smooth and elastic the dough is. And then you just turn the loaf seam side down. Put the shaped loaf onto a large, lightly buttered baking sheet. This measures about 14 by 17 inches, and then lay it on the diagonal, like I'm doing here, to give the dough plenty of space to rise, and then cover it loosely with lightly oiled plastic wrap, and then set it aside, either at room temperature or in a warm place, until it is risen and is puffy and is light and is slightly more than doubled in size. And it looks like this. It's just absolutely beautiful. Then to give the loaf a lovely shine, brush it with an egg glaze, and this just consists of 1 large egg beaten with 1 teaspoon of water. And then to give it a slashed appearance, take the metal blade of your food processor. You see, and it's such a sharp blade that you can use it, as I'm doing here, just to make 3 parallel slashes right down the length of the loaf. And then you bake this in the center of a preheated 375-degree oven for about 30 to 35 minutes until the loaf is a lovely golden brown color and it sounds hollow when you tap it on the bottom. Let the loaf cool on a rack and it's ready to serve. One of the best soups I know is chicken minestrone. It is hearty, yet low in calories, and it is loaded with all kinds of vegetables, including carrot, onion, celery, zucchini, and potato. The food processor does a very quick and easy job of it. Very often in food processor cooking, you begin with the driest ingredient first. And in this case, I'm beginning with 4 ounces of Parmesan cheese. To test the cheese, make sure that it is easily pierced by the tip of a sharp knife like that. And if it's too hard, like this rind here, then it's too tough to be processed and it could damage the blade. So be sure that the tip of a sharp knife can easily pierce the cheese. Cut the cheese into 1-inch cubes, start the motor with the metal blade in place, and then drop the cheese in through the feed tube. You want to process the cheese for about 45 seconds until it's very finely chopped, and then remove it from the work bowl and set it aside, because we're not going to be using this until the very end of the recipe, because it's going to be sprinkled on top of the minestrone to add some wonderful flavor. Now use the 4-millimeter slicing disc to process an onion. And this is a medium to a large size onion that you've peeled and cut in half vertically. Load the onion halves in the feed tube, just as I'm doing here, and process with medium pressure. Now, take 1 large carrot, about 5 ounces, that you've peeled and cut into 3-inch lengths, and wedge them into the feed tube so that they can't tip over. That way you'll get perfect carrot rounds. And process the carrot with firm pressure. Then heat 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 1 tablespoon of butter in a 5 to 6 quart casserole, and add the onion and carrot right to the casserole. This is over medium heat. And now what you want to do is stir the vegetables together so that they get thoroughly coated with the butter and oil. Cover the pan and reduce the heat to low, and cook it for about 10 minutes until the onions are just golden but the carrots are still crisp tender. Meanwhile, let me show you how to quickly dice a potato with a food processor. Have ready 2 medium-sized boiling potatoes. They're about 6 ounces each. Peel them and then cut them into slices with a sharp, heavy knife about 3/4 of an inch thick. Then use the French fry cut disc, and that's the disc with these 1/4 inch square openings running across the top. Use that disc to process the potato. Just put 1 potato right onto the disc, put the cover in place and process with firm pressure. And then load the second potato, as I did the first one, right into the feed tube, making sure that the slices of potato are kept in the original shape of the potato, and process again. And there you have some beautifully diced potato with virtually no effort at all. Aren't these lovely? Now, once you've got the potatoes processed, just add them to the casserole along with the carrot and onion, and give everything a stir. You see, we're adding the vegetables one at a time in this recipe so that each one will be cooked the proper amount of time, and then cover and let this cook for about 2 minutes. Use the 6mm slicing disc, that cuts foods about 1/4 of an inch thick, to process the celery. Cut the celery into 3-inch lengths. This is a large rib of celery, and process with medium pressure. There. Now, all you have to do is add the celery to the casserole. And then use the metal blade to process a 1-pound can, undrained, of whole-peeled tomatoes. And lately, I found that these cans are getting smaller in size. Some of them come 14.5 ounces only. So use about a 1-pound can size of these tomatoes and process by pulsing 4 times, just like that, quick pulses, just to chop the tomatoes coarsely. And then, securing the blade in place from below, add these processed tomatoes to your casserole. There. Then add a 10-ounce package of lima beans that you've thawed, and 6 cups of chicken stock. And let me caution you that if you use the canned chicken stock, it's going to be fairly salty. So you probably won't need to add any more salt to the recipe. But if it's homemade chicken stock, then you should salt and pepper according to taste. Give everything a big stir, raise the heat to high, and then bring the soup to the boil. Gosh, this smells really good. Once the soup is boiling, cover the pan, reduce the heat to low, and then cook at a very slow simmer until the vegetables are just tender. You want to be sure not to overcook the vegetables. And while the soup finishes cooking, put the French fry cut disc back in place. Take 2 medium-sized zucchini, about 6 inches long each, trim the ends off, and cut them into 3-inch lengths, and process using medium pressure. And now I want to show you what zucchini put through the French fry cut disc looks like. There, the strips are about 1 inch long by 1/4 inch wide, and they're perfect also for stir-fry dishes and salads as well. About 2 to 3 minutes before serving, add the prepared zucchini to the soup pot, and also stir in 2 cups of diced cooked chicken, and then just heat everything together only until the zucchini are just cooked and the other vegetables are tender. Ladle the soup into serving bowls, sprinkle with some of the Parmesan cheese, and serve immediately. This delicious soup makes about 8 servings, and leftovers are terrific. Have you ever made an apple pie using no refined sugars? Well, let me show you how. You start off with a thawed 12-ounce can of unsweetened apple juice concentrate. Remove 2 teaspoons, which I'll use later, and then you cook the remaining apple juice in a 3-quart saucepan over high heat. It will boil up furiously until it is reduced to 3/4 of a cup. As you see, the apple juice concentrate cooks down until it's very syrupy and slightly darker in color, and then you just want to set it aside and use it after it's cooled. While the syrup cools, I'm going to prepare the pastry, which, by the way, is flaky, slightly crunchy, and absolutely foolproof. And it's from an old recipe, but made the new, easy way with the food processor. With the metal blade in place, put 1 2/3 cups of sifted, unbleached all-purpose flour in the work bowl, along with a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 6 tablespoons of very cold butter. It doesn't have to be frozen, but it should be very cold, and 6 tablespoons of very cold lard or chilled vegetable shortening. And I really think it's the lard that makes this pastry so special. What you want to do is to cut the butter and the lard into small pieces, so I'll do that by pulsing 4 or 5 times. You only want to process until the butter and the lard are cut into fairly large pieces, and then scrape the work bowl. To hold the dough together, you add a mixture of 1/3 cup sifted unbleached all-purpose flour and 1/4 cup ice water. This is a pasty mixture, and it doesn't matter if it is smooth because it's all going to be blended in perfectly with the food processor. And what you want to do is then pulse very rapidly, meaning that the machine goes on and off in short bursts. And you may have to do this about 20 times or so. And you want to process this by rapid pulsing just until the dough almost gathers into a ball. There. You don't want to overprocess, or the dough will be tough, and you should still be able to see small pieces of fat in the dough, indicating that the pastry then is going to be flaky. Remove the metal blade and divide the dough into 2 pieces, one slightly larger than the other, something like that, and shape each gently between your hands. You see it's not going to stick into a disc. Wrap each disc in plastic and refrigerate them until they're chilled and the pastry has had a chance to relax. It'll roll out much more easily when it's chilled. And while the pastry is in the refrigerator, prepare the filling. Now for the apples, I like to use Golden Delicious or Granny Smith or even Rome Beauties. If you like a sweeter pie, then use the Golden Delicious apples. And you'll need 2.5 to 3 pounds of apples that you've peeled, quartered, and cored, and put into a large bowl with 1 quart of water mixed with 3 tablespoons of lemon juice. You'll want to process the apples with the 3mm slicing disc. So get that in place, and I think you'll be amazed at how fast it is to slice apples with a food processor. Just load them in the feed tube any which way and process with a medium pressure on the feed tube, on the pusher. And that's 2 loads going in right now. And in go the last of the apple sections. There, they are all done. So now what you want to do is empty them into a large mixing bowl. Add 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. You see how nice and thin these slices are and how fast it was to do them with the processor? And just toss them all together well with a rubber spatula. And then I'll go on to complete the rest of the filling. Replace the work bowl on the food processor base and use the metal blade to process this cooled, reduced apple juice. You see how thick and syrupy it is, almost like honey. Along with 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. This will thicken the mixture during baking. And 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of ginger, and 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. And you process this for 15 seconds. Scrape the work bowl thoroughly to make sure that the cornstarch gets mixed in with the reduced apple juice, and process for a few seconds more until the mixture is completely smooth. And then to secure the blade in place, reach under the work bowl bottom with a finger, and then grasping the side of the work bowl with the thumb, you can then pour the contents of the work bowl over the apple slices without the blade tumbling out into the dish. This mixture smells absolutely wonderful. I get a wonderful cinnamony and vanilla aroma. And I like to put vanilla into this apple pie because it tends to bring out the sweetness of the apples. And this is one reason I can get by without using any refined sugars and making this delicious pie. Just mix these apple slices together very thoroughly with the syrup. Now we can just leave that apple mixture alone for now, and then take your larger piece of pastry that is well chilled and roll it out on a lightly floured surface until it is about a 13-inch circle. And when you roll pastry out, you can see this is fairly firm. What you want to do is to keep it floured, but don't use too much flour. If you find that there's too much flour in the pastry, then brush it off with a pastry brush, because too much flour makes pastry tough. And you want to use even strokes. They can be short or long. And once the pastry is 13 inches round, then fit it into a 9-inch pie pan. I like to fold the pastry in half, and then fit it into the pan and then unfold it. And if your kitchen is very warm, you want to be sure to refrigerate the pastry so that it doesn't fall apart on you. And then you nudge it into place, as I'm doing here, just very gently coaxing it down into the pie pan. And can you see the small particles of fat? That tells you that it's going to be a very flaky pastry. And then we'll just leave these rough edges alone for now. Then take your apple filling and mound it in the pie shell. And you'll notice that the juice mixture is a bit liquidy, and you should not worry about it because it will thicken up on baking. And once you get the apples right in the pie shell, then you want to pat them into place. And the easiest way to do that is with your hands. Just pat them into place to eliminate air spaces. Then just brush the edge of the pastry lightly with some cold water and roll the second piece of pastry out to a 12-inch circle and carefully put that on top of the pie, just like that, and then press firmly with your hands all the way around to seal the edges. And then take a pair of scissors and then go all the way around to trim about a 1/2 inch of overhang. And you want to make sure that you have a double thickness of pastry all the way around this overhang, because otherwise during baking too many of the apple juices may leak out. So just be sure you take this precaution. And then, let me have this edge here, fold this double edge of pastry all the way up and tuck it under. I won't do this all the way around, just to give you an idea. Tuck it under the edge, just like this. You see, now you have a standing rim, and then you flute it, just by putting one index finger pointing down and 2 other fingers pinching around it, just like that. So you have a high edge with a fluted rim. Just a few more flutes and it's done. There, that looks rather nice. Then, take those 2 teaspoons of reserved apple juice and brush them over the top of the pie, including the edge, and this apple juice actually helps the crust to brown. Then, to allow the steam to escape, cut 4 slits in the top of the pie, and you're going to want to bake this pie in the center of a preheated 450-degree oven for 10 minutes. And that helps the pie to brown very nicely. And then you reduce the heat to 350 and let the pie bake for about another 60 minutes until the crust is a really nice golden brown and the apples are tender. Cool the pie on a rack, serve it warm or at room temperature, and vanilla ice cream is absolutely delicious with this. So that's how you make an easy and informal meal the quick food processor way. This delicious loaf of cracked wheat bread was kneaded in 90 seconds thanks to processor power. The vegetables and cheese for this hearty chicken minestrone were prepared in seconds. And both the pastry and apples for this scrumptious sugarless apple pie were prepared effortlessly with the food processor. So use your food processor to prepare this delicious dinner the fast, hassle-free way. This is Greg Patent wishing you happy cooking and delicious eating.
Cuisinart presents Patently Easy Food Processor Cooking with your host, Greg Patton.
Hi, I'm Greg Patton, and welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to be making an easy and delicious Oriental-style dinner, including a dim sum appetizer, fried brown rice, baked fish fillets with stir-fried vegetables, and a fresh pineapple sherbet in almond cookie cups. And we're going to be doing it all with a food processor, which makes food preparation so easy, I think you'll be amazed. For the pineapple sherbet, you will need a ripe pineapple weighing between 3 and 4 pounds. And the best way to tell if a pineapple is ripe is to pick it up and then sniff it. Put it really close to your nose and sniff it. And if it smells fruity and pineapple-y, then it's okay. If it smells fermented, then it's not okay, and you should reject it. There are some old wives' tales about telling if a pineapple is ripe by being able to tug at one of the lower leaves, and if it comes out easily, then they say the pineapple is done. But really, the best test is the nose test, so learn to use your nose when you are picking out food. Set the pineapple down on your work surface, and then with a sharp knife, cut the top off. Then turn it around and cut the bottom off, and then stand the pineapple up, and with the knife, just take fairly thick slices off the fruit so that you're removing the eyes. And what you want to wind up with then is a pineapple that is pretty well clean. If you have some eyes like this, then don't worry about it. You can get rid of those later. Cut the pineapple in half, and then in crosswise in fourths, and then with your knife, just carefully remove the core, and then cut the pineapple now into chunks. We'll need 4 cups of pineapple chunks, and with the metal blade in place, pour the pineapple into your work bowl, and then add a ½ cup sugar, a tablespoon of lime juice, and start the machine going and let it process first just by pulsing a few times to start things going, and then process continuously now for 2 minutes until it's very smooth. Then, after the pineapple is very smooth, scrape down the work bowl just to make sure that all the lumps are going to get mixed in. Add 1 large egg white, and then process again for another minute until the mixture is very frothy and white. And that's all there is to it. You'll see now that the mixture is really very frothy, and what you want to do is reach under with a finger to secure the blade in place, and then pour this mixture, which is almost like a whipped cream, into an 8 by 8 by 2 inch metal pan, and metal conducts the cold to the mixture a lot faster than does glass. Stick that in the freezer until it's frozen semi-firm, and then you cut it up into little squares or chunks, about 1 inch or so in size. You should freeze it not until it becomes like one big ice cube, but rather just until it's sort of mushy but semi-firm, about 1.5 to 2 hours. Reprocess and then refreeze it. And then at that point, you can serve your sherbet, which is a nice, fairly soft consistency, and it'll be just absolutely delicious. The almond cookie cups are a breeze to make, and I think you'll have a lot of fun with them, especially since the food processor does such a wonderful job with making pastry. For this recipe, you'll need a ½ cup of flour, a ¼ cup of blanched almonds, a tablespoon of sugar, 4 tablespoons of refrigerator temperature butter cut into 4 pieces, and 1 egg yolk mixed with 1 teaspoon almond extract and 1½ teaspoons water. I want to show you how to measure the flour for this recipe, and the easiest way to do it is just to take a ½ cup dry measuring cup, scoop it right into your flour, and then just with a finger sweep off the excess. And that's really all there is to it. Then with a metal blade in place, dump your flour into the work bowl, add the almonds and the sugar, and then you'll want to process this mixture for 1 minute until the almonds are finely ground. Then scrape down the work bowl, making sure you get all of the flour and almond particles back down where they belong. Add the very cold butter, and it's important that the butter be cold. And then to start the cutting process, Turn the machine on and off rapidly 4 or 5 times, and then let it run continuously for 5 to 10 seconds only. Then take the egg yolk mixture, giving it a good mix with the fork, and turning the machine on and off rapidly, pour the mixture through the feed tube, and gradually you'll see that the dough looks like it's going to gather into a ball. Stop before it actually does gather into a ball, and then take some flour, sprinkle it on your work surface, and very carefully remove the dough from the work bowl. And I say carefully because that metal blade is very sharp, so if the dough is sticking at all to the sides, just use your plastic scraper to get it out. Then roll the dough around in the flour, form it sort of into a sausage shape, and then with the heel of your hand, just break the dough in 2 tablespoon bits. What you're doing is giving the dough a final blending of the fat with the flour, which is going to make this dough wonderfully flaky, and also it's going to be very easy to roll out. Just do this a couple of times. Then take a piece of plastic, wrap the dough up, let it chill for about an hour or so until it becomes just a bit firm. And then I have here another piece of dough that's already been chilled for about 30 minutes. Roll it around lightly in flour, and then with a rolling pin, just roll this out to a rectangle. And if the dough is going to give you any problems at all, just flour it very lightly. Roll it out into a rectangle measuring about 14 by 10 inches. And then with a 4-inch cookie cutter or a very large custard cup, just cut 6 circles of dough from this pastry. And then to shape them, you take an inverted muffin tin, and all you do is take a circle of dough and just drape it right over the top like that. You don't fuss with it. Just use your fingers to sort of give it a fluted rim. You bake them in the center of a preheated 425-degree oven for about 5 to 7 minutes only, just until they are golden brown. And when they're done, they'll look like this. And to serve, you just simply put a scoop of sherbet into a cup, top with a slice of strawberry, and enjoy. Let's get on with the rest of the dinner. Here, steaming away, is the appetizer. These are steamed pork buns, otherwise known as dim sum in Chinese. And they smell absolutely wonderful. Dim sum really means tasty morsels, and if you're fortunate enough to live in a big city, there are dim sum parlors you can go to, and when you sit at your table, they wheel carts by, and you can pick and choose what you like, have a terrific selection of different sorts of appetizers, and you wind up basically having a meal of appetizers. These dim sum are made of pork, and for this recipe you'll need a ½ pound of lean boneless pork, very cold, cut into 1-inch pieces, a clove of garlic, a ½ teaspoon of sugar, a ½ teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of dry sherry, 2 tablespoons of water, a tablespoon of hoisin sauce, a teaspoon of sesame oil, 1 scallion that you cut up into 1-inch lengths, and 1/4 cup of canned water chestnuts that you've rinsed and drained. Now, let me point out a couple of things, and that is that hoisin sauce is a sauce made of soybeans and sugar and spices and a couple of other things. It has a wonderful fruity kind of flavor, and it's delicious not only in this recipe but in other recipes as well, particularly for marinades and even salad dressings. And sesame oil, when you buy Oriental sesame oil, you should be sure that you get the dark kind. This is made from roasted sesame seeds and has a really rich flavor as compared to the really pale kind that you can get very frequently. Fortunately for us now, all of these ingredients are widely available in most supermarkets. To make the recipe, with the metal blade in place, you just add everything to the work bowl at one time. It's important for the pork to be cold because it'll chop up more easily that way. So I'm adding the pork, the scallion, the garlic clove. I've mixed together my liquid ingredients and adding them all at one time, salt and sugar, and my water chestnuts. And that's it. You put the lid on, and you just turn the machine on and off rapidly, just like this, turning it on and off until you get a texture that is sort of medium finely chopped. What you want is for the water chestnuts to retain some texture and for the meat to be really chopped rather than pureed. And you can use this technique for wontons, for egg rolls, for meatloaves, for pâtés, for almost any procedure that calls for chopped meat. It looks like it's just about done. For the wrappers, we're going to be using a convenience product in a new way. And I wouldn't have believed it had somebody not shown this to me, and that is that these are refrigerated biscuits, and they make a wonderful dim sum wrapper. You just dip both sides of the biscuit in flour, flattening it to about a 3-inch circle. Take a fairly generous spoonful of your dim sum mixture. This will make about 10 dim sums this way, and this is very non-traditional. You just sort of spread it out as if you were making a pizza, except you don't stop there. You roll it up, and then once these are all shaped, you get them into your steamer, and you steam them just for about 10 minutes until they're done. A traditional way of making dim sum is to take a circle of dough, and you can certainly do this if you would rather. Take not quite so generous an amount of the filling, and then you just bring up the ends right over the top and just pinch them together gently. You can assemble these about 1 or 2 hours ahead of time and just let them sit until you're ready to steam them. And this way, this also makes a very delicious appetizer, very attractive. And when it's done, here's what it looks like, and you just cut it into thirds, and you see this lovely pattern here. To eat dim sum, use toothpicks to impale them, and then have a dipping sauce ready of 2 parts of red wine vinegar and 1 part soy sauce, and you just simply dip the dim sum into this mixture and gobble it down. And I wish you could be enjoying it with me now, because it is absolutely delicious. To serve, arrange them attractively on a platter with some watercress or parsley and the dipping sauce. The side dish for this menu is fried brown rice. I think you'll like fried brown rice, not only because it tastes good and has a wonderful texture, but it's also more nutritious than the white kind. For this dish, you'll need a beaten egg, 6 scallions that you've cut into 1-inch lengths, a 1/4 pound of fresh mushrooms, 3 cups of cold cooked brown rice, so you have to cook it ahead of time, a cup of thawed frozen peas, 2 tablespoons of dry sherry, 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, and freshly ground black pepper to taste. We'll begin by making the egg part of the dish first, and for that, you heat up a skillet, about a 10-inch skillet, with a 1/2 tablespoon of oil. Get it good and hot, and we're going to turn this egg into a little crepe. It's going to be sort of a garnish, but also add a bit of nourishment to this rice dish. Make sure the oil is good and hot. Pour in the egg. There's the nice sizzling sound I like to hear. And then you just swirl the pan back and forth, maybe using the fork to help you along, just to make sure that all of this egg gets cooked. Okay, so you see I'm not really scrambling this egg. I'm just tipping the pan so that the egg gets cooked, but only barely. Then take the pan off the fire and dump the crepe right down onto your counter. And then you just roll it up, just like a jelly roll. And with a very sharp knife, you cut this crepe into little shreds. I'm handling this a bit gingerly because the egg is very hot and I don't want to burn myself. And then once the egg crepe is all cut up, you just transfer it to a side dish, and we'll attend to it later. We'll just get this set aside, and with the metal blade in place, just dump the scallions into the work bowl. And you'll want to chop these just by turning the machine on and off, maybe 10 times or so, just until they're sort of coarsely chopped. And then carefully remove the metal blade and put in the medium slicing disc. And by that I mean the disc that will slice for 3 to 4 millimeters thick. And once that is in position, then we can attend to the mushrooms. You trim the mushrooms flat on both sides so that they'll cut easier with the processor. And then if the mushroom is dirty at all, take a mushroom brush or something soft to just brush away the dirt. Try not to put mushrooms in too much water because they tend to soak up too much of it. And here's how you slice the ends off, just very easily, like that. Save the ends. And then we'll load these mushrooms into the feed tube, flat side down. Get as many as you can in one layer, depending upon how large the feed tube of your processor is. And then once the mushrooms are all loaded in place, since the mushrooms are a soft vegetable, remember to use soft or light pressure. And here we go. There. You'll find that if you have really firm mushrooms, they'll slice beautifully in the food processor. Now, in the same skillet that you used for the egg crepe, heat 2 tablespoons of oil over medium-high heat. And then we're just going to dump all of this wonderful scallion mushroom mixture into the pan. And with 2 flat wooden spatulas, this is what I like to use best of all in stir frying, you just toss these ingredients together. And you'll find that the mushrooms and the scallions will cook in just about a minute. The mushrooms will have a squeaky sound. They will start to give up a squeaky sound as they are losing their juices. And you're getting a wonderful aroma. You'll get a wonderful aroma from the scallion and mushroom combination. Then add the sherry, 2 tablespoons of dry sherry, and then just keep tossing for about a minute or so. Just keep tossing for about a minute or so until the sherry has evaporated. Be sure that you added those ends of the mushrooms that you trimmed off. And as you can see now, you see the sherry has all evaporated. Then you can add your cooked cold brown rice. This happens to be long grain, but you could use short grain if you prefer, and just toss it all around. Add 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, the cup of peas, and a generous grinding of black pepper. I'd recommend about 1/4 teaspoon or so. And you just keep tossing and mixing everything together until the rice is heated through. And then you're almost ready now to serve it. Then just get the egg that you prepared earlier, dump that into the skillet, and believe it or not, the rice dish is done. You can do this actually about 15 to 20 minutes ahead and turn it out into a serving dish, which is what I'm going to do right now. And then all you need to do to keep it warm is to cover it with aluminum foil and keep it in a low oven, meaning just on the warm setting, and then it could sit there and wait until the fish dish is ready. It takes only a few minutes to make the main course of baked fish fillets with stir-fried vegetables, and what a delicious and aromatic dish it is. You'll need 2 pounds of fish fillets to feed 6 people. You can use any kind you like. I happen to like either cod or scrod. To cook the fish, you can put it into a skillet or into an oven-proof serving dish that you have brushed with oil. And then you take some more oil and brush it over the fish fillets very lightly. And it doesn't matter if the fish fillets are crowded together. You are going to bake them at 500 degrees, very hot temperature, until they test done. And to see if they're done, what you do is just simply use a fingertip and then just press down on the fish fillet just very gently. And if it acts as though it springs back, then the fish is done. For the vegetable part of the dish, we'll need a 1-inch round slice, 1/4 inch thick of fresh ginger root that's peeled, 1 large peeled carrot cut into lengths to fit the feed tube, 2 medium-sized red bell peppers and 2 medium-sized green bell peppers, and a special sauce mixture. And to get things going with the metal blade in place, start the machine and drop the ginger through the feed tube, and we'll want to process it until it's finely minced in about 10 seconds. Just listen to your machine. You'll hear at this point, for instance, you can't hear the ginger being flung around the work bowl, and so it's finished being mixed. Then remove the metal blade, put in the medium shredding disc, that's the coarse hole shredder, and then load your carrots into place in the feed tube. And carrots are a very firm vegetable, and so since they are so firm, we'll have to use firm pressure in order to process. There. Now, whenever you shred carrots, you'll usually find a few pieces sitting on top of the shredding disc, and that is nothing to get upset about. That's routine. Have a skillet with 2 tablespoons oil that you've heated up over medium-high heat, and then put the carrots and the ginger into the skillet. Give it a good toss, and let this cook, for about a minute or so while you attend to the peppers. To process, we're going to convert our processor from a shredding machine into a slicing machine. And what I'm doing is putting the thin slicing disc in place. And then all you do is to take these pepper rectangles and load them in position. I'm going to do this the long way, but if your feed tube is not as wide as mine is, then you can stand them upright. The idea is to pack them in so that when we process them, we will get thin little slivers. Okay, so here we go. Light pressure. Then we'll load up our second batch. These are the red peppers. If those of you have not tasted these red peppers, you have a real treat in store because they are wonderfully sweet. And fortunately for us, they are starting to become available now almost year-round. So lock this in position and with light pressure process. Now, the peppers are done. Give the carrot mixture a toss. And I just want to get this out of the way. Reach over for the sauce mixture, which consists of a half cup of chicken broth, a tablespoon of cornstarch, 2 tablespoons of dry sherry, and also 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. We just add the peppers to the skillet and just toss everything together for just about 1 or 2 minutes. This is absolutely beautiful. Remember, do not overcook this because peppers overcook very easily. Then add the sauce mixture. Give it a stir because, as you know, cornstarch mixtures tend to settle. And while this is heating up and coming to a boil, let's get the fish dish together. Bring my serving platter out here. And as soon as these juices have thickened, which is just about now, I'm going to put most of these vegetables. Absolutely wonderful. I think you'll be just delighted with this dish. Put most of the vegetables onto your serving platter. And then take your cooked fish fillets and arrange them on top. And then, maybe using chopsticks or a spoon, put the remaining vegetables on top of the fish fillets. So there we have it. A delicious and nutritious and low cholesterol Oriental-style fish dinner made in a matter of minutes with the help of your food processor. You can drink anything you want with this dinner. Tea would be nice, beer would be great, even a rosé wine would be wonderful. But don't use a dry white wine or even a red wine. Those would probably be too heavy and the white would probably get lost. This is Greg Patent wishing you happy cooking and delicious eating.
Cuisinart presents Patently Easy Food Processor Cooking with your host, Greg Patent.
Hi, I'm Greg Patent, and welcome to my kitchen. Today we're using the food processor to make an informal pizza supper, including this quick and easy pizza with tomato sauce, pepperoni, green peppers, and mozzarella cheese, a wonderful fresh spinach and mushroom salad, and for dessert, these light-textured, crunchy oatmeal cookies that you can serve with some fresh fruit. Let's start with the pizza, and this is a one work bowl recipe, meaning that we won't have to wash the work bowl out until the very end. And you start by proofing the yeast, sprinkle 1½ teaspoons of active dry yeast over 3/4 of a cup of warm water, and then add a pinch of sugar to help the yeast get started. Stir the mixture up, and then you let it stand for about 10 minutes until the mixture becomes bubbly and foamy and looks like this. When the yeast is all nice and foamy, take a tablespoon of olive oil and then just stir it into this dissolved yeast. And I'm just going to let this sit here for a minute while I get the flour into the work bowl. You'll need 2 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. Have the metal blade in place, and then add your flour to the work bowl. And here's how to measure it. You take your dry measuring cup, scoop it into your flour bin to overflowing, and then you just sweep off the excess. Then add a ½ teaspoon of salt. Start the machine going. And then you pour this liquid in, right into the flour in a stream as fast as the flour will absorb it. And then once all the liquid is in and the dough is gathered into a ball, we'll want to let this knead for just about 45 seconds. And that is it in terms of the kneading. Just about 45 seconds. You see the dough is a bit sticky, which is as it should be. It shouldn't be dry. You don't really have to knead it at all. You see that just working it a little bit in your hands, it sort of cleans itself off your hands. And then to let it rise, the easiest thing to do is to put it into a lightly floured plastic bag. This is a 1-gallon size bag. Just twist all the air out. Take a twist tie, and then you can just let it set aside at room temperature until it is doubled or tripled in bulk. It'll take about 1½ hours or so until the dough looks like that. And now, once the dough is ready, we can go on to make the toppings of 6 ounces of well-chilled mozzarella cheese, 4 ounces of pepperoni, and a medium-sized bell pepper that you've cored. Now, what you want to do is to process each of these topping ingredients, one after the other, and then remove them from the work bowl. And with mozzarella cheese, or with any sort of semi-soft cheese, you want to make sure that it's really very well chilled. And if it feels at all soft to you, stick it in the freezer for maybe 10 minutes. And then with the medium shredding disc, the coarse shredding disc in place, you process using very light pressure. Once the mozzarella has been shredded and you've removed it from the work bowl, then put in the thin slicing disc. This is one that will slice foods 2 millimeters thick. Put that into your food processor. Take your pepperoni, make sure that you've removed the skin from it, and then process the pepperoni with firm pressure. For the green pepper, I'm going to use the medium slicing disc, one that slices foods 3 or 4 millimeters thick. And since I like whole pepper rings, I'm just going to have a whole pepper right in the feed tube. And then with pepper, which is a soft vegetable, use very light pressure. Now, once the pepper is done, just remove it from the work bowl and then set it aside. Set it aside with your other topping ingredients until we'll work with them later. Now, for the sauce, you'll need a ½ cup of parsley leaves, 1 clove of garlic, a medium-sized onion that you've peeled and cut into 1-inch chunks, a 1-pound can of whole tomatoes with their juice, some basil, some oregano, and some freshly ground black pepper. Have the metal blade in place in the work bowl, and then add the parsley right into the work bowl. And then let me show you how to peel a clove of garlic. You take it, put it on your work surface, and then take a heavy knife, and then just come whamming down on it with your fist, which is going to smash the clove of garlic, and the peel is literally going to fall away so that you don't have to labor over removing garlic peel anymore. Process the parsley and the garlic together for just about 20 seconds. And then while they're processing, heat up a tablespoon of olive oil in a 2-quart saucepan. When the oil is hot and when the parsley and the garlic are minced, remove them from the work bowl. Always be careful when dealing with the metal blade. And then add them to the hot olive oil. Put the blade back in place. Add the onion to the work bowl, and then I want to show you how to chop onions without them turning mushy. Just turn the machine on and off rapidly 3 times, sometimes 4 times, and that's going to coarsely chop your onions. This gives you a nice consistency of onions so that you'll have little pieces when you go on to eat your pizza. Just stir everything together. Let the onions cook with the parsley and the garlic for, say, 2 or 3 minutes until the onion becomes tender. And then for the tomato part of it, just pour your tomatoes back into the work bowl, juice and all. Add about a teaspoon of basil and a teaspoon of oregano. And I found that you can even up these quantities to about 2 teaspoons, depending upon how herby you like your pizza. And then grind in the equivalent of about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. And then you're going to want to process this just about 4 quick pulses to coarsely chop the tomatoes. Then you just add this sauce, this tomato mixture, right into your saucepan. Notice what I'm doing. I'm securing the blade in place through the bottom with a finger. Just pour all of that out. Stir up the sauce mixture. Cook it for about 20 minutes over medium-high heat. And you see at this point here, it's pretty liquidy. It's not at all thick enough yet. And you want to cook it until it becomes thick and sort of holds its shape in a spoon like this. You see? Just like that. You want it to really become that thick and sort of hold its shape in the spoon, just like that. And then what you're going to want to do is let this sauce cool completely. It'll thicken even further as it cools. Once it's completely cooled, then we can go on and shape the pizza. To shape the pizza dough, you can either roll it out to a 14-inch circle on a lightly floured surface like this, or if you're more adventuresome, take the ball of dough that's been risen, coat it lightly with flour, and then let it rest for a few minutes so that the gluten becomes relaxed. Roll out the circle of dough until it is about 8 or 10 inches in diameter, and then you just start spinning it, as I'm doing, like that, until the circle of dough has extended itself into about a 12-inch circle, and then you can just set it down and either finish rolling it out or stretching it by hand. I know my wife always gets afraid that dinner is going to wind up on the floor whenever I do this, so usually when she's around I just simply roll out the circle of dough. To bake the pizza, you can either put the circle of dough into a 14-inch pizza pan, as I have here, just either roll it out or pat it out. Take a large, heavy baking sheet, put it in a preheated 450-degree oven and let it heat up for at least 10 minutes, and then when you're ready to bake, after you've sauced the pizza and put on all the toppings, then you set the pan right on that baking pan. And by doing that, having that extra source of heat under the pan, you'll get a nice, crisp brown crust. If you want a super professional type pizza crust, then what I would recommend is that you line your oven shelf with quarry tiles or a pizza baking stone. You can buy these at a building supply place. Just be sure that you measure the dimensions of your oven and line the oven shelf with the quarry tiles. Preheat the oven to 450 degrees about, say, 20 minutes before baking, and then you can take a baker's peel or a piece of plywood, sprinkle it lightly with cornmeal, and you want to get this cornmeal all over it because what we'll be doing next is transferring this circle of pizza dough. I'm going to fold it in half and gently ease it over and then unfold it right onto the baker's peel. And then you take your sauce and you pour it on. Then just spread the sauce evenly over the pizza crust. You'll still see nice chunks of tomato because the processor just chopped the tomato coarsely, which is exactly what we wanted. And you don't need to build up an edge on this crust. It'll sort of form its own edge as it bakes. And then you've got these gorgeous slices of pepperoni that we made with the thin slicing disc, and just arrange them all over the pizza. And of course, pizza is such a free-form thing. You can use another sausage if you'd like, although I think pepperoni makes a terrific pizza. Take the green pepper and distribute the green pepper over the pepperoni. And if you like red pepper instead of green pepper, by all means do that. But I think this color contrast is really beautiful. And then take the shredded mozzarella cheese and then distribute that over everything. Just make sure you spread it to cover the pizza evenly, and you don't want to shortchange any part of the pizza by being too skimpy with the cheese. Now, the challenge comes when you want to try and get this thing off this baker's peel. And here's what I do. I almost got that right on the floor. Just keep shaking it. Shake it to make sure it's loose on the peel. And then go over to your oven, and then we're ready to put it in. You reach in with the baker's peel, going all the way to the back, and then just gradually ease it out. And there it is, safely on the tiles. And by the end of the show, the pizza should be ready. It only takes about 15 minutes or so to bake at 450 degrees. It'll have a nice brown crust with a bubbly top. So we'll take a look at it then. This mound of fresh spinach, a shallot, and these mushrooms make the beginnings of a terrific salad to serve with the pizza. This is another one of those wonderful recipes where everything goes into the food processor work bowl, one right after the other, and the salad is ready before you know it. To begin, have the metal blade in place, have a cold, hard-cooked egg, put it into the work bowl, and then we're just going to pulse it a few times to chop the egg coarsely. Just like that. And there's a basic rule of food processor cooking that says, in most recipes, you're going to want to work from the driest ingredient to the most liquid. And in this case, the egg is a dry ingredient, and even though it's going to be the final addition to the recipe, the garnish, we do it first so that we can chop it without it getting all mushy. Put the metal blade back in place, and then get a shallot ready. Let me show you what a shallot is. It's one of these bulbous things right here. When you peel it, it looks purple. It's a member of the onion family. It's very mild. And if you can't get a shallot, you need a medium-sized one, then use the white part of 3 green onions. That's a good substitute. Start the machine, and then in order to mince the shallot, we'll just drop it through the feed tube. And then right before your very eyes, in just a few seconds, it'll be minced. After the shallot is minced, just scrape down the work bowl and then add the remaining dressing ingredients. A 1/4 cup of olive oil, 1/4 cup of safflower oil, 3 tablespoons of cider vinegar, 2 teaspoons of sugar, a generous grinding of black pepper, maybe about a 1/4 teaspoon or so, and then some freshly grated nutmeg. And you'll want to add, about a 1/2 teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg. This dressing doesn't have any salt in it, and it gets its flavor, a lot of its flavor, from the nutmeg. Then we'll just process this for 3 seconds to blend. Remove the metal blade. We will be done with that for now, and put in the thin slicing disc. And this is going to be the disc that we're going to use for slicing the mushrooms. Let me show you how to do the mushroom. Take a mushroom and lay it on one of its sides, and then with a sharp knife trim off 2 opposite ends so that you have 2 flat sides. With flat sides, you'll find that the mushrooms load up very easily right onto the disc, and they will stay flat and give you much better slices than if you tried to stack them on top of each other. Also make sure that your mushrooms feel firm and are tightly closed. And then you'll want to process these mushrooms with just very light pressure. And by doing one layer at a time, you are almost assured of very even slices. Then just put in your second or third layer of mushrooms, depending upon the size of your feed tube, and you'll see that they should be wedged in fairly tightly, and then process with very light pressure. Once the mushrooms are done, we'll replace the thin slicing disc with the thick slicing disc, and this is one that cuts food 6 millimeters, or about 1/4 of an inch thick. And that's how we're going to process the spinach. This is washed spinach. The leaves have been washed, thoroughly dried on paper towels, and then you just start off with 1 pound of spinach. By the time you've washed and trimmed it, you have 1/2 pound of spinach. Pack the leaves loosely into the feed tube, and then with very light pressure, you process. Now, once all the spinach has been processed, you just take the entire work bowl and you turn it upside down into your serving dish. Scrape out all of the dressing, and then all you have to do from this point on is toss everything together well. You want to make sure that all the spinach gets coated with the dressing. The mushrooms have been sitting in the bottom of the work bowl for a bit longer than the spinach has been in the work bowl, so the mushrooms have a good coating of dressing. And once everything is mixed, then you take your egg garnish and you just sprinkle it over the middle, just like that. And you should do this just before you serve the salad, and I think you'll find that everybody will love it. Since pizza is so informal, I'd suggest serving some light-textured, crunchy raisin oatmeal cookies along with some fruit for dessert. With the metal blade in place, add 3/4 of a cup of unbleached flour to the work bowl, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/2 teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg. And then just process this for 3 to 5 seconds just to mix the dry ingredients together well. Dump everything out of the work bowl, tapping the bowl to make sure that everything is out. Put the metal blade back in place and add to the work bowl 1 softened stick of unsalted butter that you've cut into 4 to 6 pieces, and 1/2 cup of sugar. And then process this for 1 minute, stopping to scrape the work bowl once halfway through the processing. Then add a large egg, 3 tablespoons of milk, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and process everything together for 30 seconds, stopping to scrape once. Then scrape down the work bowl, and now we just add all of the remaining ingredients. Take the flour mixture and sprinkle it over the egg, sugar, and butter mixture in a ring. You'll get much better mixing that way. Add the oatmeal also in a ring, 3/4 of a cup of quick cooking rolled oats, 3/4 of a cup of raisins, and 1/2 cup of walnuts. And then we'll use the processor to fold everything together by pulsing the machine once and then twice. And then we'll scrape one more time, going all the way around, and pulse once or twice more for complete and thorough mixing. And that is what it takes to make those cookies. Use a spatula to distribute the raisins evenly within the batter. And then to shape the cookies, you just take heaping teaspoons of the batter, just like that, and then place these mounds about 2 inches apart on foil-lined cookie sheets. And you'll need 2 standard-sized cookie sheets lined with aluminum foil, or you can lightly butter the foil if you prefer. And this amount of batter will make you 2 dozen cookies. When you're ready to bake, adjust 2 oven racks to divide the oven into thirds and preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Then bake the cookies for 17 to 20 minutes, rotating them top to bottom and front to back. about halfway during baking. And then you keep baking them until they turn a rich golden brown color. Spring back when you press them lightly with a fingertip. And when they're done, transfer them to cooling racks and let them cool completely. And then you can dig in. Now let's see how our pizza's doing. And it is just beautiful. So slide your baker's peel under it, and there we have it. And when you thump the crust, you hear a real thump, showing you that it's crisp and not soggy. So there's our pizza supper, made from start to finish with the food processor. This is Greg Patent, wishing you happy cooking and delicious eating.
Cuisinart presents Patently Easy Food Processor Cooking with your host, Greg Patent.
Hi, I'm Greg Patent, and welcome to my kitchen. Today we'll be using the food processor to make this hearty and beautiful turkey broccoli quiche in a flaky pastry crust, accompanied by a salad of sliced tomatoes vinaigrette and a refreshing and attractive fruit dessert made with the best fresh fruits of the season. The pastry I'll be making is an all-purpose one that you can use for quiches, pies, or tarts, and you make it very quickly with the food processor. With the metal blade in place, add 1 1/3 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour to the work bowl, and a ½ teaspoon of salt, and 1 stick of cold unsalted butter, it should be very cold, that you've cut into 6 equal pieces. And you start the pastry by pulsing the machine just 3 times, just to start cutting the butter up into smaller pieces. And if there's any flour sticking to the top of the work bowl cover, just tap it down with your hands. Then have 1/4 cup of ice water, and as you pour it in, turn the machine on and off rapidly, just as I'm doing here, until the pastry gathers into a ball. And the point of doing this is so that when the water is all incorporated into the flour, you'll still have pieces of butter left, which is what makes the pastry flaky. It's almost there, and that's it. You see, you just have the pastry almost gathered into a ball. Then remove the pastry from the work bowl, making sure that you scrape the metal blade clean with the plastic scraper so that you don't cut yourself. And then just turn pastry out onto this wax paper, and then press it all together into a ball with your hands. And then you can just refrigerate it, wrap it up and refrigerate it until you're ready to use it. This is really ready to use immediately, but if you weren't ready for it, just wrap it in the wax paper and then tuck it away until you're ready to work with it. Whenever you work with pastry, I really recommend that you work with very cold butter and very cold water, and let the pastry rest for a few minutes, meaning 30 minutes or so in the refrigerator, just so that the flour absorbs all of the liquid. That way you'll get a very beautiful, flaky, tender pastry. And to roll the pastry out, I'm just sprinkling my surface very lightly with flour, and then use a heavy rolling pin to work this dough. You can work from the center outwards if you want, as I'm doing here, or you can roll in any direction you choose. The important thing is just to use gentle, even strokes. And you're going to want to roll this out until the pastry reaches a diameter of about 13 inches. This pastry is almost 13 inches in diameter. I can tell just by looking at the size. And once it's all rolled out, then you're ready to put it into a pie pan. I'm going to be using a 9-inch pie pan, but you could use, if you'd rather, one of these very attractive ceramic quiche pans, which makes a fluted rim for you, or one of these false-bottomed metal quiche pans with a fluted rim. Both of these make very attractive presentations. But since I want to show you how to make your own fluted rim, I'm using a plain pie pan. Fold the pastry dough in half to form a half circle, and then ease it into your pie pan, and then carefully unfold it. And then to avoid stretching, watch what I do. You pick up the pastry, you see, from the outside edge, and nudge it down right into the pie pan so that the pastry hugs the sides without stretching. You see what I'm doing? Just nudge it down without stretching, and then you can just sort of pat it right in place with your hand so that the pastry actually hugs the side of the pan. Then take a pair of scissors, and you'll want to trim off some of the excess pastry, leaving a rim, an overhang of about a ½ inch, which will then be able to fold back to make the standing rib, which we can then flute. And after you've trimmed all of the excess pastry, don't throw it away. Wrap it up, gather it together, and then you can save it to use as a snack. Now, to make the rim, you take the pastry, just as I'm doing here, and fold it back on itself to make a raised edge. And once the edge is raised all around, then let me show you how to flute the pastry. Have one finger, your index finger, pointing straight down, and then with the thumb and forefinger of the other hand, push the pastry around that index finger to make an indentation. And you just keep doing this all the way around. I'm not going to do the whole pan for you. I want to just give you an idea of how to do this. You see? You just press the thumb and forefinger of one hand around the index finger of the other hand to form this lovely scalloped edge. And then to make sure that the scallops stay, you just pinch the inside edge of the scallop with your fingers. And then once you've got the whole pan done, then you take a fork and prick all over the bottom. Once you've pricked the pastry all over, I'm just doing this at about 1/4 inch intervals, then refrigerate or freeze the pastry until it becomes firm. Then line it with aluminum foil, or you could use a parchment paper. And to keep the pastry from puffing up during baking, pour into the foil some dried beans. Believe it or not, these beans were white once, but they've seen years and years of use. Or you could use rice, or you could also use preheated pie weights. And once the beans are in, just spread them around to fill the pastry shell, and you bake the pastry in the center of a preheated 400-degree oven on a preheated baking sheet for 12 to 15 minutes, just until the pastry is partially set. Remove the foil and beans and return the pastry to the oven to bake for another 3 to 5 minutes until it just begins to color slightly. And there you have a partially baked pastry shell that will stay crisp even after it's filled and baked again. The filling for this quiche is very flexible. I'll be using a 4-ounce piece of chilled Swiss cheese, 4 ounces of fresh mushrooms, 8 ounces of cooked turkey cut into 1-inch pieces, a small onion weighing about 2 ounces peeled and quartered, and 1 cup of cooked broccoli, flowerets, and stems cut into small pieces. But you could use cooked chicken instead of the turkey if you wished, or you could use carrots or peas for the broccoli. Use whatever appeals to you. What you want to do first is to use the medium shredding disc to process the cheese and make sure the cheese is well chilled, and use light pressure always on processing cheese, and then as soon as it's processed, remove it from the work bowl. With the metal blade in place, start the motor and drop the onion through the feed tube. And you'll find that when you're working with small amounts of food, like a very small onion, this is the best way to do the chopping. Start the motor, drop the onion in, and then watch to see that the onion is finely minced. And when you hear no more chopping sounds, the onion is done. There. Leave the onion where it is and add the mushrooms to the work bowl. And you'll want to process the mushrooms to chop them finely. And the best way to do that is to turn the machine on and off several times, 5, 6 times, and then heat up a tablespoon of butter in a 10-inch skillet over medium heat, and cook this onion and mushroom mixture until it's tender and most of the liquid has evaporated. And you'll notice that when the mixture is cooking, there will be just a wonderful aroma coming from the skillet. So while that's cooking for a couple of minutes, I'm just going to leave this alone and go back to my work bowl. Notice I'm not cleaning it out. Put the metal blade back in place, and then add the turkey, and process the turkey by pulsing the machine 4 times, just to chop the turkey coarsely. To assemble the quiche, sprinkle half of the shredded Swiss cheese over the bottom of your partially baked quiche shell. Just sprinkle and spread about half of this cheese over the bottom. Make an even layer of broccoli over the cheese. Then take the turkey. You can see the texture of the turkey. This is not a mince, it's a coarse chop. And spread this turkey over the broccoli. And notice that the quiche shell is getting pretty filled by this point. Then take your cooked mushroom and onion mixture and just distribute it evenly over the top. When you spread the topping on top of the turkey, don't pack it down. Just spread this mushroom and onion mixture just loosely. Then take the rest of the shredded cheese and sprinkle that over the top. I think at this point you can see why I wanted to make a fluted rim for this pastry shell, because we really need a deep shell for this wonderful quiche. To make the custard, put the metal blade in place, add 4 large eggs to the work bowl, a teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of tarragon, dried tarragon leaves, and you should crush them in your palm of your hand to release their aroma and fragrance, and then about 1/8 of a teaspoon of grated nutmeg, and freshly grated is always better than the pre-grated canned variety. Start the motor, and as you do, rapidly pour in 1½ cups of heavy cream in a steady stream, and process only for a few seconds so that the mixture is thoroughly blended but you don't get a froth. And then, to make sure that liquids don't leak out of your processor work bowl, secure the blade in place with a finger reaching underneath the work bowl and carefully pour this custard mixture into the quiche shell. You'll want to bake this quiche in the center of a preheated 375-degree oven on a preheated baking sheet for about 30 to 35 minutes until the quiche is puffed, browned, and set. And then you let the quiche cool for 10 minutes before serving, and this will serve 6 generously. One of the nicest and easiest salads you can make with your food processor is sliced tomatoes vinaigrette. You begin by turning the motor on with the metal blade in place and dropping a 1/4 cup of parsley leaves through the feed tube, and you let this parsley process until it's very finely minced, about 20 seconds. Add 6 large or medium-sized black olives, which have been thoroughly drained, and then just process for 3 seconds to chop the olives. No longer, because then they'll become a puree. And then you remove the olive and parsley mixture, just scrape it out of the work bowl, and set it aside. And then this will be used as the garnish. Then put in your thick slicing disc, which slices food about 6 millimeters thick. Take a head of romaine lettuce, cut the end off, and then you'll want to cut the sections of lettuce into 3-inch lengths. And I usually grab one end and cut through the other end. Put the lettuce right into the feed tube vertically so that when we process the lettuce, you are going to get shreds, and use light pressure. Once you've processed all the lettuce, then transfer it to a large serving platter. To make the dressing, use the metal blade to process 1/3 cup of oil, which can be tasteless salad oil, or you can use olive oil or a mixture of the two, depending on your likes. A tablespoon of lemon juice, a tablespoon of red wine vinegar, a 1/4 teaspoon of oregano, just crumble that into the work bowl, and a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. And we'll just process this for 3 seconds. And that's how you do a vinaigrette dressing in the processor. Then remove the metal blade, replace the thick slicing disc in the work bowl, and take 4 medium to large-sized tomatoes, one right after the other. You've removed the stems. Put them into the feed tube and then process with light pressure. I think you'll really be amazed at what a wonderful job the food processor does with tomatoes. Just remember, the tomatoes should be firm, and you should always use light pressure. And that's it. To serve the salad, just take the tomato slices out, and as I do that, I think you'll see how beautiful these slices have turned out to be. And you can arrange these attractively, or if you're really in a hurry, what you can do is just turn the whole work bowl upside down onto your serving platter, and then pour the dressing over, and then arrange your tomatoes in an attractive manner later on. But I think that these tomato slices are just absolutely beautiful. I'm going to leave the ends in the work bowl, pour the dressing over, and then take the parsley and black olives and then just sprinkle that over the top. And there you have a very beautiful and delicious tomato salad vinaigrette. Fresh fruit prepared with the aid of your food processor makes a wonderful light dessert. Just be sure to use the best fruits of the season and select them for color, flavor, and texture. I'll be using pineapple, bananas, oranges, kiwi, seedless red grapes, cantaloupe, and blueberries. But just use whatever you can get a hold of that's the best. Let me show you how to do a pineapple for the food processor. I've cut the top and the bottom of this pineapple off, and then with a heavy, sharp knife, and standing the pineapple up vertically on your work surface, cut all the way around to remove the tough skin and also the brown eyes of the pineapple. And then you cut the pineapple in half lengthwise, and then in half again so that you have quarters. I'm not going to do all of this. I just want to show you a little sample. Remove the core, and then cut each quarter in half lengthwise so that you have a very long spear. This is the 1/8 of the pineapple. And then cut these in half crosswise so that you have spears about 3 inches long. And set these aside until you're ready to use them. Peel the kiwi fruit. It has a thin brown skin. And for 6 people, you should have 2 or 3 kiwi. And then cut through the kiwi, almost but not quite through to the bottom. First one way, and then turn it around and cut the kiwi through so you have almost quarters. But leave the bottom connected so that the kiwi will be easy to load into the feed tube. And similarly with the orange, cut all of the skin away with all of the white fiber beneath it, and also section your oranges into quarters, going almost but not quite all the way through. And 2 or 3 oranges should also be enough for about 6 people. Then take 3 large bananas, peel them, and cut them into 3-inch lengths. And to prepare your cantaloupe, cut the cantaloupe into large wedges first, and then cut the wedges in half crosswise. And that's how we'll be processing the cantaloupe. And to do the fruit, you'll want to use the thickest slicing disc for your food processor. And I'm using the 8mm slicing disc, which processes foods about 1/3 of an inch thick. And I'll do the pineapple first. And you have those 3-inch spears that I showed you how to prepare. Just load them into the feed tube vertically so that they are wedged in fairly tightly so that they will stand upright on their own and won't tip over when you go to process them. And then process the pineapple using very light pressure. Just leave the fruit in the work bowl as you go along, and we'll just dump everything out at the very end. Take the kiwi and load the kiwi into the feed tube and process again with very light pressure. Next, we'll do the oranges, and just do 1 or 2 at a time, whatever fits into your feed tube. Again, light pressure. Then you can move on to the bananas, and I think you'll be amazed as I was the first time I tried to process bananas with a food processor, because I was really thrilled with the even, smooth slices that I got. But always remember, light pressure. Next, you can do the grapes, and they can just go into the feed tube in any orientation. And I know you'd probably never slice grapes by hand, but with a food processor, it is a snap. Light pressure. Now, switch from the slicing disc over to the French fry cut disc. And I want you to take a look at this disc. It has openings that are about 1/4 of an inch square, and there's this row of 1/4 of an inch openings all the way across the disc. And you get wonderful strips, not only of potatoes, but of cantaloupe, which is what I'm going to be processing next. So put the disc into your work bowl, and then load the cantaloupe with a flat side down. Remember, we first made large wedges, and now we go to making smaller wedges by cutting those large wedges in half. And just be sure that you orient the cantaloupe so that there is a flat side down. And when we process this and you see what gorgeous strips these make, I think you'll want to do this for yourself and serve it for your family or for company. So use light pressure on cantaloupe. See how attractive the cantaloupe is? It's probably something you'd never do by hand, but it is so beautiful and gives a wonderful texture to the fruit dessert. To serve the fruit, turn it out onto a large serving dish with sides. Toss well so that all the fruits are mixed together and their juices have a chance to commingle. Make sure that you get some of the cantaloupe right on top where people will look at it and wonder what it is. Sprinkle with the blueberries for, again, some nice contrast of color. And decorate the border with lemon leaves that you can get at a florist shop. And here's the dessert, ready to serve. So that's how to make turkey broccoli quiche, tomato salad vinaigrette, and a fresh fruit dessert, quickly and easily with your food processor. This is Greg Patent wishing you happy cooking and delicious eating.